Iran did not comply with relevant 2231 provisions when they were in place, as evidenced by hundreds of drones it transferred to Russia in 2022 for use in attacks against Ukraine. Iran's failure to uphold its non-proliferation obligations has prolonged conflicts and perpetuated instability across the Middle East and beyond for many years. The International Atomic Energy Agency's most recent report on verification and monitoring in Iran, in light of UN Security Council Resolution 2231, demonstrates plainly that Iran continued to accelerate its nuclear activities without any credible civilian justification. On June 12th, the IAEA Board of Governors found Iran in noncompliance for its many failures to uphold obligatory nuclear safeguards. It is regrettable that certain members of this Council have opted to turn a blind eye to, if not encourage, Iranian noncompliance. The United States will not turn a blind eye to Iran's noncompliance and ongoing threat.
To no avail, Iran twice refused a fair proposal put forward by the coordinator and decided to further escalate its nuclear program to the level we are all aware of. Coupled with Iran's failure to comply with its legally binding safeguards, obligations and assessment confirmed by the Board of Governors resolution last month, Iran's ongoing nuclear activities continue to pose a threat to regional and global security. Iran's nuclear program remains a serious proliferation concern. We are particularly worried about any possible relocation of nuclear materials since the recent military strikes. We reiterate that, as a member of the NPT and its nuclear safeguards regime, Iran is obliged to declare and place all nuclear materials located in Iran under IAEA safeguards. Iran must fully cooperate with the agency and refrain from making threats against its personnel and Director General Grossi himself, whose professional work we commend. In this regard, we are alarmed by the initiative in the Iranian parliament to suspend cooperation with the agency.
From the very beginning, the United States and Western countries deliberately refused to fulfill their part of the obligations under the nuclear deal. Thus, they failed to create the conditions for Iran to receive economic benefits from the lifting of European sanctions, which had been in place until 2015. Then they followed the example of the United States, which withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018, and following Washington, resumed their unilateral sanctions pressure on Tehran, thereby undermining the prospects for a full restoration of the JCPOA readiness, for which our Iranian colleagues have repeatedly expressed. At the same time, Berlin, London, and Paris tried to portray the legitimate countermeasures taken by Iran, which they themselves, that is Berlin, London, and Paris, had provoked as an escalation of a supposed Iranian nuclear threat. They have repeatedly tried to nullify the constructive cooperation between Iran and the IAEA Secretariat, within which work was being done to resolve outstanding issues. And even despite this, Iran has remained and continues to be the most strictly monitored state among all members of the agency. And from the reports of its Director General, one can draw a clear conclusion about the absence of proliferation risks. Let us emphasize, nowhere in the IAEA's reporting is there any mention of the conversion of nuclear material accumulated in the Islamic Republic of Iran for undeclared or military purposes. In other words, the IAEA has found no signs of Iran developing nuclear weapons. Therefore, all the claims made by the Western delegation to the contrary are lies, aimed at an audience that either has not read these reports or does not understand the issue. The cynicism or hypocrisy of the aforementioned Western states reached its peak on June 12th. On that day, the IAEA Board of Governors adopted yet another pretentious and completely detached from reality resolution on the Iranian issue, instigated by Western countries. Immediately after that, Israel launched strikes on Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities. A week later, the United States attacked sovereign Iranian territory. And as if to confirm that this sequence of events had been coordinated in advance, the United Kingdom and France, who portray themselves as champions of diplomacy, rushed to defend the actions of Western Jerusalem and Washington. As a result, this past Sunday we witnessed yet another attempt to legitimize the use of force in violation of the UN Charter and strikes on peaceful nuclear facilities, breaching the IAEA Charter and all norms of nuclear and physical nuclear safety. And the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, as we have already mentioned, did not even hesitate to cynically declare that Israel is doing the dirty work for Europeans. Against this backdrop, the Western trio still has the audacity and hypocrisy to demand not from Israel or the US, but specifically from Tehran, the victim of aggression, to return to the negotiating table. In case our British, French and German colleagues continue to threaten to trigger the mechanism for reinstating anti-Iranian sanctions under UN Security Council Resolution 2231, I would like to remind them that there are no political, legal or procedural grounds for doing so. Berlin, London and Paris, through their chronic violations of the aforementioned resolution and the JCPOA, have deprived themselves of the right to use the mechanism set out therein. And as for the United States, they have not had this right at all since the moment they withdrew from the deal. However, now the United Kingdom, France and Germany do not even have the moral right to mention the possibility of a snapback. It was precisely their actions that became a true betrayal of diplomacy and led to the situation we are forced to deal with right now. Madam Chair, a special responsibility lies with the IAEA and its Secretariat. In the context of the encroachment by Israel and the United States on the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, which is fundamentally based on the NPT, Director General Grossi and his colleagues are obliged to strictly adhere to their mandate, as well as to the resolutions of the agency's General Conference 444 and 533. The IAEA leadership should not limit itself to vague wording and fragmentary information, but should present similarly detailed reports on the attacks carried out against Iranian nuclear facilities that are under IAEA safeguards. At the same time, it is fundamentally important to call things by their proper names, directly indicating who exactly is carrying out this deliberate strike. Unfortunately, we have already seen cases when the Director General of the IAEA, in his reports, in addition to objective facts and statistics, includes ambiguous evaluative judgments. These are immediately used by a narrow group of countries to justify unjustified aggressive actions. The Russian Federation consistently supports the search for a peaceful solution and the resolution of concerns surrounding the Iranian nuclear program, one that would be acceptable to all parties and the international community as a whole. A great responsibility in this regard lies with the Security Council, which is obliged to take the necessary measures. This is precisely the aim of the draft Security Council resolution proposed by Russia together with its Chinese and Pakistani partners.
Israel and the U.S. have used the potential future threats as a pretext to take military action against Iran, which seriously violates international law and infringes on Iran's sovereignty. Attacking Iranian nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguards and supervision sets a dangerous precedent and poses a grave threat to the international nuclear non-proliferation regime. China once again clearly expresses its condemnation. These actions have also undermined diplomatic efforts to resolve the Iranian nuclear issue and brought uncertainty to the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231. China hopes that these countries will face up to the following basic facts. The United States is the true originator of the Iranian nuclear crisis. It was the U.S. that unilaterally withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2018, reinstated and continuously escalated unilateral sanctions against Iran, and adopted maximum pressure measures, resulting in Iran being unable to enjoy the economic benefits granted by the agreement and being forced to reduce its compliance with the agreement's obligations. It is also the United States that, disregarding its own credibility, brazenly launched military strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities, undermined the negotiation process it had initiated itself, and once again led the Iranian nuclear issue into a deadlock. This has caused a sudden escalation of tensions in the region. Iran's sincerity in resolving the nuclear issue should be recognized. To this day, Iran is still fulfilling its nuclear non-proliferation obligations and implementing the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. Iran has repeatedly emphasized that it does not seek to develop nuclear weapons and has engaged in multiple rounds of professional and pragmatic negotiations with the United States in a constructive manner, never abandoning diplomatic efforts. However, some countries have selectively cited the IAEA Director General's report, ignored Iran's positive cooperation with the agency, and without sufficient consultation, forcibly pushed for resolutions by the agency's Board of Governors, undermining dialogue and intensifying tensions and confrontation. The relevant countries should seriously reflect on the negative consequences caused by this irresponsible action. Mr. Chairman, China believes that diplomatic means to resolve the Iranian nuclear issue have not been exhausted, and there is still hope for a peaceful solution.